Adjust the idle air bleed up or down until it just touches the bottom of the hooked end of the gauge. If you earlier found a letter stamped on the idle air bleed, you are done with that adjustment. If there wasn't a letter stamped on it, the final adjustment must be made with the engine running. Refer to a service manual for details of this procedure on your particular vehicle. Continue with reassembly by reconnecting the vacuum brake hose and reassemble the accelerator pump lever to the pump rod in the same hole as previously used. With a screwdriver, push the pivot rod pin back into place. Next, reattach the choke rod to the lower lever inside the float bowl casting. Once connected on the lower end, reattach the upper end of the rod to the choke blade shaft using the retaining screw earlier removed. Reinstall the carburetor on the engine in the reverse order of removal. With the carburetor reinstalled, reconnect any vacuum lines and electrical connectors earlier removed. Because most final adjustments have to be made without the air cleaner in place, plug any vacuum lines that may still be opened. Connect the positive lead of the digital volt ohm meter to the Kelly green wire connector. It is commonly located near the carburetor or passenger side strut tower. Connect the black lead from the meter to a good engine ground and set the meter to the 6-cylinder tachometer scale. Make sure the transmission is in park, or in the case of a standard transmission, neutral with the parking brake set. After making sure there are no wires or hoses in the way, start the engine and allow it to reach full operating temperature. Make sure you are standing off to the side of the vehicle and not in front of it whenever making adjustments with the engine running. After the engine is fully warmed up and idling, the dwell reading on the meter will begin to vary, indicating that the onboard computer is operating the MC solenoid. On carburetors with no letter stamped on the idle air bleed, the dwell reading should fall between 25 and 35 degrees. Adjust the idle air bleed valve by turning it clockwise or counterclockwise until it is within that range, attempting to be as close to 30 degrees as possible. Perform this step carefully. Only make very slight adjustments, 1/8 of a turn or less at a time, as the idle air bleed is very sensitive. If you cannot get the adjustment close to 30 degrees, and you earlier found a letter stamped on the idle air bleed valve, you will need to adjust the idle mixture screws at the base of the carburetor to bring the dwell reading within range. To do so, you will need to remove the caps that are covering the idle mixture adjustment screws. Follow the instructions detailed in a service manual, or a special plug remover tool can be used to simplify the procedure. With the plugs removed, you can access the idle mixture adjusting screws with a special tool as shown. Bring the mixture control dwell to within factory specifications. If the dwell reads low, adjust the screws out evenly to reach 30 degrees. If the dwell reads high, adjust the screws in evenly to reach 30 degrees. Final fine-tuning may have to be made once again by turning the idle air bleed valve. After all adjustments are complete, seal the idle mixture needle openings with a non-volatile, oxygen sensor-safe silicone sealer. Lastly, reconnect all vacuum hoses, reinstall the air cleaner, and test drive the vehicle for proper operation.
Now let's review the replacement and adjustment procedures on an internally mounted mixture control solenoid on a GM vehicle. Begin with the ignition switch in the off position. To avoid losing any small parts during this procedure, we suggest removing the carburetor from the engine before performing any of the disassembly steps. With the carburetor on the bench, proceed by removing the air horn. If the air horn gasket is damaged during this procedure, a new one can be obtained in a carburetor rebuilding kit. Remove the plastic filler block and carefully remove the metering rods. Using the special mixture control solenoid adjusting tool, turn the lean stop all the way in while counting the number of turns. Record the number of turns, then remove the lean stop from the carburetor. Remove the electrical connector retaining screw and remove the solenoid and connector together as an assembly. Compare the new and old parts to be sure of correct replacement. Position the new solenoid and electrical connector in the carburetor and reinstall the electrical connector retaining screw. Reposition the lean stop by turning it all of the way in and backing it out the same number of turns as was recorded earlier. Reinstall the metering rods and springs. Insert the mixture control solenoid plunger and using the special lean stop limiting gauge, adjust the lean stop as per instructed. Remove the plunger and reinstall the plastic filler block. On the air horn, remove the plug that covers the lean mixture screw and save it. Drill out and remove the rich stop screw plug. Drill out the retaining rivets and remove the plate that covers the idle air bleed valve. Reinstall the air horn on the carburetor. Follow the tightening sequence from a Haynes manual to prevent warping or leaks. Using the idle air float gauge, measure the mixture control solenoid plunger travel. It should be 4/32 of an inch. Adjust the travel by turning the rich stop screw in or out. Reinstall the rich stop plug using red Loctite to secure it in place. Use the shepherd's hook tool to measure and adjust the idle air bleed. Reconnect any vacuum hoses or linkages removed earlier and reinstall the carburetor on the engine. With the carburetor installed, check and adjust the idle speed and mixture control solenoid dwell with the engine fully warm. Refer to a Haynes manual for the exact procedures on your vehicle.